Hi everybody, this is Hero from the Birds, back with another Shadowlands video. In this video, I'd like to take a look at a Warcraft log of the Denathrius Normal kill that our guild did. And the purpose of this video is to help you as a healer, especially a Holy Paladin, think about your activity in any given encounter. But in this specific one, we'd like to talk about Denathrius. Denathrius is a great one to track using Warcraft logs, because there's so much going on in the multiple phases of this piece, and you can really nail down areas where you can improve as a healer. I have all of the basic stats for you up here, including the gear I was using, the basic eye level, some of the conduits. I'm using Untempered Dedication and using Martyr a little bit more freely. I'm using Shock Barrier, and this is sort of the basic Glimmer build. And this could also have been done with Holy Light build. I think especially for Denathrius, there's lots of room for that build as well, using Rule of Law especially to make your heals reach. But I'm just going to press play here, and I want to show you specifically what my character is doing. So you'll see in the middle of the screen the casts that are going off from my character, and then you'll see the healing done as we move through the fight. And I just want to encourage you, often healing meters are a really deceptive thing, because it depends on how many people are in your raid. In this case, we have 23 for 4 healers. And it also depends on how often people screw up. So I would always take healing meters with a grain of salt, meaning you can't count on them to accurately represent how well you're doing. Even if you parse really high with a certain build, it doesn't mean that that build is going to always work for every boss, nor does it mean that it was even a good pull for your group. But what you see here is in the first stages of Denathrius, a lot more use of Light of Dawn. Part of the reason for that is our group is stacked up quite tightly together on either side of the boss, and so we can get maximum use here. And my role has tended to be a more of a triage or spot healing role within our group. I'm joined by a lot of really great throughput healers in our Resto Shaman, and especially our Resto Druid and Mistweaver Monk. And so you'll see at the beginning, we leverage a lot of their great throughput to push us through phase 1. And as the kind of spot healer, I'm going to be looking to catch people who are too low, especially with my shocks and with Word of Glory. You can see Nogs and Quag go down fairly low there, so those would be my responsibility to grab those people. Aussie again, dropping. So those are the things I'm looking for as a Holy Paladin, even if I'm playing the Glimmer build. I'm going to be leaning towards trying to press my Word of Glory more often than Light of Dawn, but it just so happens that in the opening stages of this fight, Light of Dawn is pretty excellent because everyone takes fairly even damage. You want to top people off in this first phase because the slam will do 30 to 40% of everyone's HP on normal. And I know everyone's getting more gear, but it's just in your best interest to try and manage the CDs of your group by working them out so that there's one ready for every one of those slams. So that's what we tried to do. Largely, I think we began with Trank, and then we had probably Revival go off at some point, into Totem, those sorts of things. As far as the gameplay of the Glimmer build goes, it's pretty straightforward in this first stage because you can be right on the boss the whole time. So what I'm also looking to do as I work on perfecting my Glimmer play is make sure that I'm using Crusader Strike enough. I want to see, when I'm looking at the logs, a steady stream of Holy Shock Crusader Strike back to back as often as possible. And the reason for that is it's a really good habit to get into for maximizing the cooldown on your Holy Shock. If you don't press Crusader Strike immediately after pressing Holy Shock, you run the risk of wasting some of the CDR that you can get. You don't need to press 2 charges of Crusader Strike, but I would encourage you guys, when you're evaluating your logs, just go back through, click on your character here in the replay section of Warcraft Logs, and follow along and see how often you do that Holy Shock into Crusader Strike moment. If those two are not paired together really close, you'll find that your uptime on Holy Shock will go down a lot. So I'm tracking that. Here we move down into the second phase where we have adds to deal with, and we're sort of all stacked close together. There's a lot more movement in this phase, and the one thing that I want to prioritize when I'm evaluating my own play is, where am I in position to the boss? Am I in melee enough? Because there's a couple of moments in this phase where you're going to get pushed away from the boss due to the sword coming through and cutting across the raid, or the AoE splash that he's going to do that everyone needs to get out of. And I want to try my best to think through, okay, at this minute, at the 4-minute mark, I noticed that I was pretty far away from the boss, and that was about 30 or 40 seconds of being away from the boss. That's too much. I'm missing out on a lot of Crusader Strike opportunities to build holy power. So just be aware that these are the best kinds of questions to ask yourself, and one of the reasons I like watching Warcraft logs in particular is you can get rid of extraneous information. That is to say, you're not following along with a replay where you see all the graphics going on and you see the entire room. You just have the icons of your characters, you know where the boss is, and you can see where some of these mistakes are being made. You'll notice also that I'm trying to leverage untempered dedication a little bit, and I did it a lot better, I think, in a previous pull. We had, I think, 2 pulls on this before we killed it. But what I'm hoping to do is build to 5 stacks before the fight begins so that I'm ready to go, and I just keep that Light of the Martyr 5 stack rolling. At 5 stacks, it does a lot of healing, guys. It's basically a little bit better than a Holy Shock, and I only have 184 for the potency. And this goes fairly well together with the Glimmer kit because you can do your Holy Shock into Crusader Strike, and then usually you have an open GCD. If you have, you could cast your Judgment, you could cast Word of Glory, but often there's that time, that hesitation time, when you don't want to press your second Crusader Strike because it'll cool down Holy Shock too much. You want to save it, and you're not sure what to press next. You have Judgment, you could throw Word of Glory, but you don't have any Holy Power, and Martyr really works quite well. It's a really powerful tool, meaning the spell power coefficient is extremely high, and the scaling on it through this conduit is going to be off the charts, guys, going forward. I think it gets up to 12%. I'm only at 6.5% here from the scaling, so that stacks up to 5 times. The self-damage is really negligible, even though on Warcraft logs, which I'll show you later, it will subtract it on your log. So if you're really worried about being a person who shows up on Warcraft logs, you probably shouldn't press Martyr because it'll subtract it in the final deduction. But that doesn't matter at all. The self-damage is almost irrelevant as far as gameplay goes. You're trading saving somebody's life with a Martyr versus a little bit of self-damage that you can mitigate with your own tools. So here we've kind of made it through the second phase, and we're getting close to the middle phase, just cleaning up the ads as he starts to do his pushback ability. So I would encourage you again, make sure you're in melee because you're going to have moments where you get blasted away from the boss. So plan accordingly, guys. You can see here on the meters, things look fairly reasonable given our group. Everyone's pretty healthy, and we're doing about 4K to 4.5K HPS just with our standard build. And I've transitioned, for the most part, away from using Light of Dawn where possible, and instead I'm going to start focusing in this last part on trying to Word of Glory and Martyr people back. We're in execute range, so I'm checking to see if I'm starting to throw my Hammer of Wrath, which is happening a little bit, though I think it probably could happen a lot more. Anyways, as we get to the close of this fight, we will turn our attention in a moment to the meters and look at actually the breakdown. So the second part of this, to discuss with you what does it look like at the end and how do I read these numbers and why is it significant. But just be aware, guys, that for the Glimmer build, you really want to watch your positioning. So go to Warcraft logs in the replay, find out where you're actually standing, and then see how effective things are. One of the things I really like about Warcraft logs, by the way, is it'll give you a kind of cone of your point of view. So it's showing you what you could physically see with that sort of cone red area. You can see it just in front of me here as I'm away. That's essentially the shape of your Light of Dawn as well, is the kind of cone of what you can see. So if you see me facing towards X and away from my party, when I press Light of Dawn, you know that that was a very ineffective use of that ability. Just always be aware, if you're going to be using a lot of Light of Dawn, especially in the first part of Denathrius, you want to stand just a little bit back from your friends to make sure that it's actually hitting people. Sometimes I was too close to the boss and there was 4 or 5 melee behind me, still hitting the boss, but too far away to make any use. On normal, we have a little bit of gear here. I think most people are around 190 in our group, so this should be a fairly straightforward kill, and nobody really should be dying in our group, given that we have pretty good gear relative to the content. But otherwise, guys, that's a fairly straightforward look at what's going on in Denathrius. And this is a tool that you can use. This is under the replay section of Warcraft Logs that I find so helpful for just evaluating what's going on. Now, I take that piece and we'll add on top of it the actual logs themselves. So here's a breakdown of the skills I use, and I would always suggest people to go and look at these. Don't worry so much about where you ranked in terms of the world. You can do that if you like. I think this was like a purple parse or something, 80, 87 or something. It doesn't really matter at all. And you'll notice that here you can see Light of the Martyr doing 7.23%, but they also calculate the damage to yourself in this. I wouldn't worry at all about why they're calculating this. It doesn't make any difference in my mind that it does self-damage. It's almost irrelevant. But the actual throughput of Light of the Martyr is really excellent for what it's doing. Anyways, but if you're doing the Glimmer build on Denathrius, you should expect some kind of breakdown like this. You want Holy Shock to be really high up because you're hoping to cool this down as often as possible. If your Holy Shock is closer to your Light of Dawn in this fight, it's likely because your Crusader Strike uptime was low. So there's a lot of tools that are available to you within Warcraft Logs to check even that sort of detail, to see how many Crusader Strikes you cast, that sort of thing. You can go to the damage portion and look at that. But just for now, as we wrap up this video, notice here the split between Light of Dawn and Word of Glory is pretty reasonable. Glimmer of Light doing a lot of extra work because your team is rotting, so there's a lot of damage going out. This is just an excellent tool. If you're doing the Holy Light build, guys, this will look very different. Your Beacon of Light is going to be much higher because you're probably going to split it into Beacon of Faith, since you can't make use of Glimmer as often when you're casting. So it should be your top heal. You'll probably have Word of Glory also much higher as well. Note here we're also using Shielding Words, which I think is an excellent ability, even though you're using a lot of Light of Dawn. So I cast 34 Light of Dawns and we still managed to squeak out about 2% HPS overall just with the Shielding Words from Word of Glory. If you are taking Shielding Words and you have a smaller group, so we have, say, only 20 people, it's a lot more reasonable to lean far more into Word of Glory than casting Light of Dawn, because you're going to be far more effective at topping individual people, and that will translate into more shields on yourself, which again feeds the entire apparatus. Just a note on Light of the Martyr, the healing side actually leeches, but the damage side doesn't. So Light of the Martyr, say, hits for 10,000 healing, you will leech your percentage based off of that, and then it will do 5,000 damage to yourself. So the 5,000 damage gets DR'd by your devotion aura at the beginning, so it's 3% off the top. If you have Devo aura running, it'll do the entire percentage from that. If you have your own DR from shield, like the 20%, it will also do that. And if you are in Divine Shield and immune, it will do no damage to you, but you'll still leech the health off of Light of the Martyr. Anyways, I want to encourage you guys to think about your healing and think about tools that can help you to improve. Largely it has to do with the amount of casts that you do. So be checking here how many casts, be looking at the breakdown, and be thinking, especially as you watch the replays, about positioning. Super important for the Glimmer of Light build that you maximize your uptime in melee. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we will catch you again next time.